Can a single strategic decision ruin a victory, divide an entire team and put the future of one of its star drivers in check? What happened to McLaren in Qatar was not a simple mistake. It was a political disaster of historic proportions. Everything McLaren built with precision over the 2025 Qatar Grand Prix weekend crumbled in a matter of seconds. Oscar Piastri had just dominated free practice and secured an incontestable pole position. The car was fast, the race pace was solid, and for the first time this season, it looked like the Australian driver had a race completely under control. It was the perfect setting to cement his position as a real title contender. But then, the moment that would change everything. Lap 7. A minor incident, apparently without major consequences, forced the exit of the safety car. Nico Hülkenberg's Sauber was stranded in a compromising position, and the race direction neutralized the Grand Prix. For any F1 strategist, this situation represents a key opportunity to make a pit stop without losing much real time. Almost all the teams understood it that way. Red Bull reacted immediately, stopping Max Verstappen in what is known as a free stop. Mercedes, Ferrari, and even teams from the back of the grid took advantage of the window. But not McLaren. Andrea Stella and her strategy team made a decision that is now being analyzed as one of the most costly mistakes in the championship. Leaving both drivers on the track, both Piastri and Lando Norris. They didn't stop. They didn't react. They didn't correct. And the worst thing, they did not anticipate that the rest would do it. The official argument was that they feared losing time in the pits if they performed a double pit stop. They also underestimated the aggressiveness of their rivals and overestimated the life of their tires in that first stint. A lethal combination of fear, lack of effective communication, and blind trust in a simulation that did not reflect reality. The consequence was immediate. When Piastri finally pitted several laps later, he rejoined traffic, lost pace and was at the mercy of Verstappen, who had already warmed up his new tires and was gaining devastating lap time. What until then was a controlled race turned into a nightmare. The victory that seemed inevitable for the young Australian completely disappeared. Not only did he lose the position with Verstappen, but it would also compromise his chance to fight for the podium. This situation was more than an isolated error. It was a complete strategic collapse. Because it wasn't a bad technical call, but rather a systemic inability to respond to a changing environment in real time. The team that a year earlier had been praised for its meticulousness and tactical recovery after the slow start to the 2024 season, now showed deep cracks in its decision-making structure. And that was evident not only in the result, but in the body language on the pit wall, on the team radio, and in Andrea Stella's frozen gaze during the minutes after the failed stop. Formula One does not forgive. A single decision can reconfigure an entire championship. And Qatar was that for McLaren. A turning point that showed that, even with the best car and the best track position, the margin of error is zero. Because you don't just lose a race, you lose confidence. And when that happens, everything else falls apart. Oscar Piastri is not known for being an explosive driver in front of the cameras. His profile has always been that of a methodical, cerebral, and measured young man in every word he pronounces. Therefore, when after the Qatar Grand Prix he released direct public criticism of his team, the entire paddock felt it as a high alert signal. With a mix of contained frustration and raw honesty, Piastri declared that what happened was pretty painful, and that it hurt him even more than the disqualification he suffered in Las Vegas. Words that do not go unnoticed coming from a driver who, until that moment, had remained disciplinedly loyal to McLaren's institutional discourse. But his reaction was neither spontaneous nor isolated. It was the cumulative result of a series of decisions and situations that, over the course of the season, have slowly eroded his confidence in the team's internal management. In circuits like Baku and Singapore, there had already been moments of tension between Piastri and Lando Norris. Avoidable contacts on the track, stopping strategies that seemed to lean slightly towards the British, and a general perception that McLaren favored, even unconsciously, its most high-profile driver. Qatar was the straw that broke the camel's back, and that fracture could no longer be hidden. Piastri felt, rightly, that the team had not only compromised a victory that belonged to them on the track, but had done so for a decision that could not be justified under any logical competitive parameters. This was not a simple human error. For him, it was a betrayal of the trust that a pilot places in his wall. That feeling of lack of protection is what weighs most on the psychology of an elite runner. Because when you feel that the team is no longer fighting for you with the same intensity, the entire emotional and professional scaffolding begins to falter. What was most worrying for McLaren was not just Piastri's public reaction, but what was not said in front of the cameras. Inside the garage after the race, the silence was palpable. There were no immediate conciliatory statements. There were no symbolic hugs or pats. Just a feeling of structural discomfort. A feeling that, although the fight for the championship was still alive, the team had been divided into two visions. That of a pilot who feels that he is at a disadvantage, and that of a structure that, although it does not openly admit it, seems to have developed an inertia of favoritism. The engineers knew it. The mechanics knew it. And above all, Mark Webber knew it. And although he had not yet said it fully, the political bomb was already activated. Because once a driver loses faith in his team, regaining that connection is not only difficult, it can be impossible. Where Oscar Piastri keeps a low diplomatic profile, Mark Webber operates with surgical precision in the shadows. The former Australian driver, now his compatriot's manager, has built a reputation as one of the most influential and feared agents in the paddock. When Webber speaks, he doesn't do it randomly. Every word, every insinuation, every seemingly trivial comment is part of a carefully calculated strategy. And after the disaster in Qatar, he activated all available media pressure to send an unequivocal message to McLaren. Oscar is not tied to anyone. The phrase that marked a before and after was launched with an almost casual tone, but with a devastating symbolic charge. Oscar should improve his Italian. For the media, it was dynamite. For insiders, it was a declaration of war. That suggestion, which alluded directly to a potential future connection with Ferrari, reconfigured the political board of Formula One in a matter of hours. Because it wasn't an innocent comment. It was a warning. It was a reminder that Piastri has options. And it was, above all, a covert criticism of the treatment that its driver has received from McLaren. Webber doesn't need to raise his voice to exert power. He has direct access to key team bosses, maintains close relationships with key figures in the FIA and FOM, and knows the inner workings of the trade press better than many journalists. And now, he is deploying that network of influence to generate pressure from all sides. Not only in Woking, but also in Maranello, where the figure of Charles Leclerc is beginning to enter the terrain of contractual uncertainty beyond 2026. Ferrari, which is looking for stability and young talent for the future, already has Piastri's name on its radar. And that possibility does not sound so far-fetched if the current tension at McLaren continues. But this is where the situation becomes even more complex. Because Webber not only acts out of professional loyalty to his client, he also acts from personal experience. During his time as a driver, he experienced firsthand the consequences of being the unofficial number 2 in a team that claimed to treat its drivers equally. Red Bull in the Vettel era was for him a school of strategic frustration. And now, as manager, he seems determined not to let Piastri go through the same thing. If it detects that McLaren's internal narrative systematically privileges Norris, whether in tactical decisions, media visibility, or internal support, it will not hesitate to activate Plan B. Is this a betrayal afoot? Not necessarily. But it is a threat. A public warning that if McLaren does not correct its course, it could lose not only its young star, but also the internal stability that it took so much work to build. Webber is playing a game of chess, and he's doing it quietly, but with moves that resonate in every corner of the paddock. Because when a manager of his caliber takes action, it is because the conflict is no longer tactical, and he has become a politician. The strategic mistake in Qatar, Piastri's reaction, and Mark Webber's political intervention are not isolated events. Together they form a disturbing pattern that raises a critical question for McLaren's future. Are we seeing the beginning of an internal crisis that threatens to collapse its most ambitious project in more than a decade? Furthermore, McLaren is not competing in a vacuum. Mercedes has emerged strongly thanks to the perseverance of George Russell and the promise of Kimi Antonelli. Ferrari now has a rejuvenated Lewis Hamilton, and Red Bull, although in structural decline, still has Max Verstappen, a talent capable of tipping the balance on its own. Every point lost due to internal disputes is an opportunity given to their rivals. And if McLaren intends to stay at the top, it needs not only a fast car, but a unified and armored structure against this type of crisis. This is the turning point where it is decided whether McLaren is prepared to manage not only a winning car, but also two personalities who, every weekend, compete for more than just points. They compete for trust, for prominence, and ultimately for history. Leave it in the comments, because maybe there we will begin to write the next chapter of this story.